Hello everyone, thank you for joining us today. Before we get started, I'll go over a little bit of some housekeeping rule or notes to keep in mind of. So as an attendee to this webinar, you'll be able to listen with your computer audio. Alternatively, you could also call in using the number above and the webinar ID associated with this meeting. This is recommended if your internet feed is unstable. As an attendee, you won't see the option to turn on your camera. We will also be taking questions throughout the presentation, so feel free to ask our panelists any questions that may come up through the Q&A tool, which should be located at the bottom of the window. Please submit your questions there and it will be queued up on our end and we will go ahead and answer them live for you all. As much as possible, we do ask that you refrain from asking questions in the chat box as it may get lost because we will be adding some links there. If you would like to ask a question verbally, please use the raise hand feature. It will place a hand next to your name and we can go ahead and unmute you for you to ask your question. If you're calling in, you could also press *9 to raise your hand if you're on the phone, or star or *6 to mute and unmute yourself. Next slide, please. And I'll go ahead and drop a link in the chat for the standard grants guidelines, so feel free to follow along. The page numbers will be listed on the slide, so it'll be easy for you all to keep a track with us. And next slide, please. And I'll go ahead and pass it to Kristen to start us off.
All right, thank you so much for that introduction, Robert. And welcome everybody. This is our 2022 Safe Clean Water Standard Grants Informational Workshop. This is the fourth one that final one that we're holding for this cycle, but everything will be posted on our website if you want to refer back later or know of anyone who was unable to attend. But we're happy for you to join us today. My name is Kristen Yasukawa, and I'm the Supervising Program Administrator for the Safe Clean Water Grants and Partnerships Program. And then our team also actually works on our public art program here at the Santa Clara Valley Water District. And so we are very excited to share this year's funding opportunities for standard grants. And this informational workshop is intended to clarify what we mean, what's available, and to also give some tips along the ways to help you develop a really strong project application. But first, before we jump right into all the content, I would like to introduce our grants team and the other panelists that are here today. I'm very excited that we have a full team, so you might see some new faces on. But we can popcorn it over to the grants team, and I'll start with Amy.
Hi, everybody. I'm Amy Fonseca. I am the Senior Management Analyst in the Grants and Partnership Program. If you are a returning grantee, then you probably know me. But for those of you who are new and learning about our program, welcome. We're excited that you are here to join us today. I'll pass it on to Renee.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Rene Moreno. I'm a management analyst under the Grants and Partnership Program. I support our standard grants, our mini grants, and our upcoming public art program. Welcome, and I look forward to working with you. I'll hand it over to Peggy.
Hey everyone, Peggy Lamb, Management Analyst in the Community Benefits Program. I provide support to all of the grants programs we have, and I mainly support and lead the mini grants program. I'll pass it over to Albert.
Afternoon, everyone. My name is Albert Lay. I'm a grants and partnership analyst with the team. I will be supporting all the programs and will be the lead for the upcoming water bottle filling stations grant program. And I'll hand things over to Robert.
Hello, everyone. My name is Robert Marmito, and I am the intern for the Community Benefits Program. I support with any administrative work and also some outreach activities like social media content for our different grant projects. And yeah, I'm excited that everyone's here, and I'll pass it back to Kristen.
Great, thank you everyone. So that's our grants team administering the Safe Clean Water grant funding. And we are also excited to introduce to you some subject matter experts internal here at Valley Water who are available to answer any more technical questions that you might have along the way. So I will hand it over to Michael. You want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Michael Lee, and I'm the environmental planner at Valley Water. I'll be assisting with the environmental review of your grant applications and as well as any questions that you might have today.
Great, thank you, Michael. And I'd like to introduce David. David, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm David Cahan. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, great. I'm David Cahan. I'm the risk manager here at the Valley Water, and I'm here to assist in all insurance-related issues.
Excellent, thanks, David. And then Errol is here from our CPRU team. Errol, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi, my name is Errol Gabrielson, associate engineer at CPRU. So things, if there's permitting or agreements or anything like that that needs to be done in combination with the grant, our unit would be key in that. Other than that, we're happy to help out with the grant process.
All right. Thank you so much to our subject matter experts. As you might notice, there are quite a few acronyms that we do use. So if we say something and you're not familiar with it, please just let us know. We're happy to explain what that is. And I think we'll start with CPRU, which I think we've mentioned just now, the team that Errol's a part of, and that's our Community Projects Review Unit. And so if anybody in the community or other cities or organizations do work either temporary or permanent projects on any sort of land that either Valley Water owns or Valley Water has easement on, then you would work with our CPRU team to get some permits to do those work. So just like getting Valley Water's permission to do that. So yeah, first acronym of the day. All right. Well, we do have a really packed agenda today. We won't read through all of these things, but we just wanted to remind everyone that our team is always here to answer any questions directly as well. Feel free to, chime in, to ask your questions along the way. This workshop is meant to be, conversational, as well as informative, or you can always reach out to us afterward for any specific questions to your project or your organization. So without further ado, I will hand it over to Renee.
Thanks, Kristen, and welcome again to everyone. So for those who are unfamiliar with who we are Santa Clara. We're our Santa Clara Valley Water District, also known as Valley Water. And most of you may know us as a wholesale drinking water provider for Santa Clara County. As a public agency that's a special district within the state of California, Valley Water's mission is to provide Silicon Valley with safe water for a healthy life, environment, and economy. Our agency is guided by three main pillars, which include clean, reliable water, flood protection, and fostering healthy creeks and ecosystems. Our grant funding opportunities aim to support and enhance Valley Water's mission and purpose. Next slide, please. So for our outgoing grant funding opportunities that are administered by our grants and partnership program, it's important to note that the funding for these initiatives comes through a voter-approved special parcel tax called the Safe Clean Water and Natural Flood Protection Program. The measure provides funding to the community to address the Safe Clean Water and Natural Flood Protection Program and the priorities listed within that measure. And ultimately, the Grants and Partnership Program aims to leverage community resources for efficient use of funds, while also increasing our partnerships and community engagement to foster stewardship activities within Santa Clara County. We here at Valley Water know that if we're wanting to create a bigger impact, we definitely want to work together and work as a community to strive for providing safe, clean, and reliable water. Next slide, please. As I mentioned, the Safe Clean Water Program and the grants that are available under that initiative are funded through a special parcel tax. This parcel tax was originally approved by voters in 2012 and was then renewed in November of 2020. So we're very excited about the ongoing support from residents to continue serving Santa Clara County through our grants program. The funding for the grants and partnership program is one of many different projects that are included in the Safe Clean Water program. Other projects include flood protection projects, capital projects, water conservation projects, water supply projects, and many more. If you're definitely interested in kind of getting a sense of what else falls under this initiative, we encourage you to go to our website, valleywater.org, and you'll be able to learn much more about the Safe Clean Water and Natural Flood Protection Program. Next slide. So a little bit more about our current initiative. So in the renewed Safe Clean Water program, there are 6 priorities, which you see on the screen now. In previous versions of this measure, we had 5 priorities, which included priority A through E. For those who are current and returning grantees, you may remember the Safe Clean Water bingo numbers that we used to function under for each of the grant opportunities that we had available. The good thing is that moving forward with the new renewed measure, where we've moved away from those bingo numbers and will be consolidating all of the different priorities under one main priority, which is priority F. Next slide, please. So in priority F, the grant key performance indicators are outlined on the project F9. So we now have 4 funding opportunities, standard grants, which you will learn more about today. We have mini grants, which are year-round smaller grants, and they cap out at $5,000 per award. We have partnerships, and coming soon, we have the water bottle filling stations. And for the purposes of our presentation today, we'll be focusing on the standard grants program. But if you're interested in learning more about the other funding opportunities, again, if you want to visit our website, you'll be able to get more information on each of the opportunities that you see on the screen, as well as an opportunity to connect with our team to learn more about the requirements and the process for each of those unique funding streams. In regards to the standard grants, they are a bit different than the other opportunities we offer because they are much higher in award allocation or the amount that we're funding. They are also available during the annual cycle, so which currently we are in fiscal year 22. They do follow a competitive selection process, which we'll be exploring a bit more in the presentation. And finally, the board of directors are the ones that review the recommendations and make those awards based on the recommendation from our subject matter experts. So this model really does differ from the other opportunities. And if you are interested in kind of learning more, again, connect with us through our website, and we're happy to check in and provide some of that information. So for the next couple of slides, I'll hand it over to Amy.
Great, thanks, Renee. So what's new for standard grants this year? We are in a transition year, and if you're a returning grantee, things are going to look pretty similar to how they were in the past, because we're carrying over a lot of the criteria and project types from prior years. This year, we've consolidated all grant funding into one pot, and there's no minimum or maximum per project type like there were in the past. That doesn't mean you want to apply for a $1.4 million grant. You're not likely to be approved for that full amount, but we do not have a limit for now. And unlike past years, The funding amount isn't limited in this fiscal year. Currently, there are 5 project types that will be available this year. And they will have a 5-year limit on the agreement term. And this year, in comparison to prior years, we've announced the grant cycle earlier. So we started hosting workshops and advertising the grants back in December in the hopes that it would give grantees more time to put together a thorough application, a really strong proposal, and get any funding or partners that they need to apply and have a strong grant. Next slide. Okay, so again, we have 1.4 million available this year for grants. As Renee mentioned earlier, the board of directors are the ones who will approve the awards, and they may award full or partial funding. So if you're not awarded the full amount, we'll work with you to reduce your scope. And just to note, not all projects that meet the minimum score or requirements are guaranteed to be funding. It really depends on how many grants we get and how strong all of the proposals are. But we are, again, looking for diversity in projects. So that would be different sizes and different areas, especially looking for projects in newer locations, projects that served disadvantaged communities, and just innovative ideas. Next slide. So here are some things to keep in mind when planning your project. The funding is provided on a reimbursement basis. So that means that we're not able to provide funding up front. What that means is that you would pay for items and staffing up front, and then you would send in your receipts to be reimbursed. The final 10% of the award amount might be retained if the project is, the grant funding is complete, but the project is not complete. And once the project is complete, we would release that 10%. So keep that in mind when putting together your budget. And lastly, our funding does have some restrictions. We cannot fund pre-award costs. So that would be putting your application together, attending this workshop. We don't fund proprietary work for which the results cannot be published and made public. So if you are inventing or you're looking at some kind of technology and you're not able or to share that information, this may not be the program for you. And again, everything must, because this is public funding, everything has to be publicly accessible. Next slide. Okay, so first tip would be to thoroughly read the grant guidelines, because everything that you need to put together your application will be in the grant guidelines. And the evaluation matrix will also be in there to show how the scoring will be done on your grant. All right, I'll go ahead and pass it back to Renee.
If I could just point out one thing to everyone. So I think you'll notice at the bottom of some of these slides, we have the pages of that in the standard grant guidelines that talks about each of these topics in a lot more detail. So if you do have your standard grant guidelines open, or you were able to download it or can download it after this workshop, this is where all of this information is referenced. So just wanted to point that out as a helpful tip.
Thanks, Kristen. So moving into the applicant eligibility, which you'll find in page 2 and 3 of the standard grant guidelines. Here, we kind of dive a bit into the applicant eligibilities. And in order to apply for these standard grants, you must fall under one of the following categories. So a local agency or municipality, special district, a 501c3 nonprofit. If you're a local nonprofit without a 501c3 status, you can file a grant proposal, but you will need to be an affiliate of and or sponsored by another nonprofit that possesses a 501c3 tax exempt status. We are also hoping to work with schools, community colleges, or universities, whether they're public, private, or not-for-profit. And as for any for-profit private organizations and company, you can apply for our water conservation research grant, but unfortunately you're not eligible for any other of the funding opportunities that we have at Valley Water. Next slide, please. As for our project eligibility, projects must be located in Santa Clara County. Any applicants that are outside of Santa Clara County are eligible to apply for funding, but do keep in mind that the work that is being conducted through the proposal of that project must be within Santa Clara County and must have that impact within the county. The project must have matching funds of at least 25% of the total project cost, whether that's through monetary or in kind. It must be completed within 5 years following the agreement effective date. And eligible applicants may seek grant funding for multiple projects only if the project scope is different for each project. So we will talk about what makes each project unique and the different criteria later on in the presentation. But do keep in mind that in order to apply for different types of funding opportunities, you do need to make sure that the project scope is different for each. And finally, only one grant may be awarded for each individual project. So if you're doing a project that might fit into multiple project types or funding areas, you will have to choose which area the project fits the most strongly with. We encourage you to review the grant guidelines and the criteria for each project because that will help you determine which project type is best suited for the proposal that you'll be submitting. And as a reference, if you want to kind of review the project eligibility more in detail, they're in page 3 and 4 of the guidelines. Next slide, please. So we do have some restrictions on certain activities that are ineligible for grant funding. Some of these activities include feasibility studies, master planning, mitigation projects, projects designed to meet regulatory or permit obligations, operations and maintenance of existing projects and programs, and also land acquisition unless specifically deemed for use in habitat or species restoration or protection. Next slide.
Before we move on, Renee, I have a question in the chat. This was actually for something earlier, so it might be for Amy. So the question is from Valley. They ask, would individuals who have their projects fiscally sponsored be eligible? And it may have been covered earlier, but go ahead, Amy.
Their products fiscally sponsored. Could we possibly unmute the person asking the question?
Okay, Valley, I'm going to unmute you so we can have you verbally ask your question and clarify if needed.
Sure. Hi. For example, I made a film which was fiscally sponsored and got grants from other organizations. If I was planning to make another film and about water and be fiscally sponsored, would that be eligible? Would that project be eligible for this grant?
Okay, thanks for your question. So for the grants funding, we'll get into more of like the budget and everything, but if you, so Valley Water will only pay up to 75% of the cost of the project. So if you have other sponsors or partners that are chipping in, so providing funding or match funding, that's fine. The only thing is when we put the budget together, you'll wanna, we can't double pay for something, right? We can't double dip. So we would have to be clear on what Valley Water is funding and your partner or sponsor or the other grant is funding.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Amy. I did want to address that individuals are not eligible to apply for standard grants, even if you are fiscally sponsored. It has to meet the eligibility criteria that we described. So if you have maybe that fiscal sponsor can apply for the grant and name you as staff as part of the project, then you would be eligible, but individuals are not eligible for this grant funding opportunity.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, and if you have any other questions, feel free to email us after, and we're happy to talk
Sure.
with you offline.
Sure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Back to you, Renee.
All right, thank you. So now we're going to provide an overview of the grant application timeline and what to expect. So currently we're in the first phase, which is the application opened early this month, and we will be accepting applications till March 4th. So do make a note of that deadline. Unfortunately, we don't allow any late submissions, so we do encourage you to submit early on in case there's any technical issues or if there's any questions that may come up. So make sure that you have that deadline set and abide by it. Once the applications are, or the proposals are submitted, we will conduct the proposal evaluations, which will start March 15 and will go till about April 15. During this time, our subject matter experts will review each of the proposals and will also evaluate the proposals during that review. Once we complete the evaluation of the proposals, then the third phase will be to present the evaluated proposals and recommendations for grant awards to the board of directors. Again, once the subject matter is reviewed, they will make that recommendation and the board of directors will review and make that allocation for the award funding. And that will be happening in May of 2022. Next slide, please. So after the board approves the funding, our team will provide the award notices to all the applicants. We're expecting for these to go out in June. If you are awarded, we will make sure to work with you to execute the agreement, make sure that we finalize the scope of the project, the schedule, and the budget to ensure that it aligns with the allocation amount. And the next phase will be having a signed agreement between both parties, and this will be the final step for the grant funding. Following the agreement effective date, then you may begin the work and begin the invoicing process. In this case, the effective date is usually the day that both Valley Water and the grantee sign the agreement. Sometimes that may need to change or be a later date, but we won't need to know that ahead of time. And it's really more of a conversation of between the grantee and Valley Water as to which date seems more appropriate with the project type and the project scope. Next question, next slide, please. All right, so we talked up until this point a little bit more about who we are, where our funding is coming from, some of the requirements from both the applicant and the project. In the coming section, we will be providing a series of different project types just to give you a sense of different examples that Valley Water has supported in the past. We also have an extensive list of these projects on our website. So if you go to valleywater.org/grants, under our standard grant resources at the bottom of the page, you'll be able to find the list of past projects. Here you'll get a sense of the project summary, some of the outcomes, and also give you a range of different activities that have been supported in the past. And just as a reminder, this year we have 5 different project types that we hope to fund. Those types include water conservation research, pollution prevention, volunteer cleanup efforts and education, wildlife habitat restoration, access to trails and open spaces. And we're gonna go through each one of these and provide you some examples and also a general sense of what the criteria will be for each. We encourage you again to make sure that you're paying close attention to the criteria and the scoring matrix, because that will again help you align your project with the best suited project type. And with that, I will hand it over to Albert.
All right, thanks, Renee. So moving on here to our first category, this is formerly A2 in our last program, but these are the water conservation research grants. So in this priority area, we're looking for projects that may have water saving devices or strategies that can assist Valley Water with its conservation efforts. So for example, you might be doing a device that reduces our water consumption or different technologies or strategies or methods related to that. You might look into cost-effective activities or other related technologies. You might develop a educational program or outreach materials that helps the community conserve water. Again, this is mainly for research. It's not the same as our rebate program. If you need more information on that, please visit our main site or watersavings.org. And this is the only type of priority area or grant type with eligibility for for-profit private entities. So just keep that in mind. Example of this project is this MicroStreams faucet adapter. This was from Electron. It was awarded back in 2016, and they developed a residential water saving faucet adapter, which utilizes 0.1 gallon per minute, which is about 13 times better than your average flow from your faucet for customers. So the water saving faucet uses micropore technology, and so this technology helps save an average of 3,846 gallons per year per person. So that's just one great example of that. One other sample or example we want to highlight is a dipper well replacement by Fisher Nickel. So in ice cream parlors and cafes, you might see these dipper wells. They're meant to create a consistent flow of water to help keep serving tools and scoops and different things that are meant for food serving sanitized. So in California, there's about 100,000 of these dipper wells in different restaurants and food vendors that can use about 500 gallons per day of water. So this technology, half that amount. So it was about 250 gallons per day. So this research will be shared with other commercial food service facilities. And so that gives you a general idea of what that may look like. Again, research projects, and then if you're a private entity, you are eligible, and it's separate from our landscape rebate programs. All right, I want to pass things over to Peggy here to talk about the next priority area.
For the next project type we have are the pollution prevention grants. And those are formerly B3, and these are projects that help prevent contaminants and litter from entering waterways and groundwater within Santa Clara County. Some sample projects include proper disposal of pharmaceuticals. So that could be, pharmaceutical bins, auto products, cleaning products, electronics, batteries, and just trash in general. There's also projects that can initiate environmentally friendly gardening and composting techniques, and we have an example of that in the next slide. And then there's also public education efforts to schools, communities, and organizations to help reduce contaminants in our waterways. Next slide. So a sample project we recently had completed was done by the Regents of University of California. And this is for their effective storage and composting of livestock manures project. And they created composting and demo sites at 2 parks in San Jose and also at Gilroy High School Farm. And this project also educated participants about the effects of manure runoff on water quality and safety, and also taught livestock owners and community members about proper manure storage and safe composting to minimize pathogens from entering our creeks and stormwater. Did we have the video to show? Yes. Thank you to Robert for putting together that fun video. We have more success stories in our highlights at our Valley Water Grants social media on Instagram. So you can check that out in our highlights if you want to see other fun videos on success projects or success stories. The next project type we have now is volunteer cleanups and education, and this is formerly B7. So these are the projects that help clean up, provide education and outreach and watershed stewardship activities. Some sample projects include providing education and programs for clean, effective creeks and waterways to undersourced communities, organizing cleanups with volunteers from local public schools, and even developing curriculum or a program for education on water quality and riparian area health for local businesses and employees. Next slide, please. So an example project of this was the Watershed Education Campaign done by Guadalupe River Park Conservancy, and they had a program for kindergarten to high school students, just educating and enhancing awareness of biodiversity in Guadalupe River or along Guadalupe River, and also hosting the annual water festival for 5th grade students, creating a 180-gallon aquarium, and also creation of a mural underneath the Coleman Avenue Bridge. Next slide, please. And we also have this Schools Going Green project done by the city of Sunnyvale. They worked with middle and high school students to clean up more than 4,000 pounds of litter during 98 cleanups around schools and campuses in their neighborhoods. This project also included a campaign to help change littering behavior, and it was student-led, and the project was awarded a recognition in 2017. Next slide. And so for this priority, I'll pass it over to Robert.
Thanks, Peggy. All right, the next project type we have is wildlife habitat restoration, which is formerly D3. And these projects support activities that create or enhance local habitats. And some sample projects include creating or enhancing wetlands, riparians, and tidal marsh habitats, protecting special status species, removing fish migration barriers, installing fish ladders, removing non-native invasive plant species, and planting native species. So as you can see, like these projects can be plant focused, or they could also focus on animals, like such as repairing their habitats or enhancing them in a way. A good reference to kind of look through is our One Water document, which is in the criteria for this one and is also attached in our standard grant guidelines. And for more information on that, we'll go through more detailing on permitting and the CEQA requirements for these, but these could also be a really good factor in scoring your grant projects. Next slide, please. So an example of a project under the wildlife habitat restoration project type is this project done by San Francisco Bay Bird Observatory. The title of the project is called Establishing Forster's Tern Nesting Sites Project. And it was awarded in 2019. And what this project did was it helped establish nesting sites for Forster's terns, which are at-risk seabirds that were once abundant in the El Viso Pond. The project reestablished these nesting colonies and also constructed islands using innovative technologies, such as bird decoys and electronic call systems. And these photos kind of show how those decoys look like on those rocks. Next slide, please. All right, and the next project area or project type is access to trails and open spaces, which is formerly known as D3. So these projects also provide new access to trails and open spaces, and some sample projects include constructing bridges to link two trails together, or creating a trail that provides a significant link to the Creekside Trail network, and activities that also support urban trails and encourage community involvement. Next slide, please. So an example of this project type was done by the County of Santa Clara for the project, which was called Calero Reservoir Oak Cove Trail Construction. This project constructed a new 5-mile trail and restoration area around the Calero Reservoir. And since its opening to the public in spring 2020, it enhances the county's nature resources and promotes a positive visitor experience. This project is also has a native vegetation element, so that is a great example of a multi-benefit project. But again, like this project was focused on creating the trails and having that as the main activity. Next slide, please. All right. And lastly, we have this other sample project done by the Mid-Peninsula Regional Open Space District for their Webb Creek Bridge. So this project constructed a new service bridge over Webb Creek in the Bear Creek Redwoods Open Space Preserve as part of a plan to open the preserve for public access. The bridge opened 4 miles of trails and facilitated a regional multi-use trail connection between the Lexington Basin and Skyline. It also ensured emergency service access is possible throughout the preserve. Next slide, please. And I'll go ahead and pass it on to Renee to go over the award recommendations.
Thanks, Robert. I hope that by now you've all gotten a sense of the different projects that we funded in the past, and hopefully it sparked some ideas. Before I jump into the award recommendations, are there any other questions, comments out there before we move along?
Not that I see in the chat box or the Q&A.
Great, thank you. So once your application is submitted, a panel of subject matter experts will evaluate each of the applications based on the scoring criteria provided in the standard grant guidelines. It's important to note that each priority type has a unique scoring criteria, which is why it's super important for you to review the criteria as you're developing your proposal. We encourage you to pay special attention to the minimum requirements and the project evaluation criteria of the priority type you'll be submitting your proposal under. Although staff will be here to support you in every step of the submission process, staff does not decide who is recommended to the board of directors. We rely on our subject matter experts to review each proposal and make that recommendation to our board of directors. While you're reviewing the standard grant guideline allocations for each project type, make sure that you're also paying attention to the funding allocation matrix, as this matrix will give you more information as to how much funding you may be able to receive based on the score of your proposal. And I think that, this section is definitely dependent on a very thorough review of the standard grant guidelines. We are very transparent as to what the expectation for the criteria is and how we're going to be evaluating each proposal. So we do hope that you take some time in understanding and reviewing that criteria, and it'll help you create a stronger proposal at the end. Next slide, please. There are a couple of opportunities for proposals to get additional points through our bonus criteria. There are 3 areas in which proposals can get up to 15 points total. So if each criteria is achieved, you get an additional 5 points per criteria. So in this case, we have 3 criteria that you could be awarded bonus points. The first one is financial stability, in which we are looking for proposals that have more than half of the project's required matching funds come from a monetary source and not in kind. And also the proposal demonstrates a strong financial ability to carry out the project. The second criteria is the applicant is a first-time standard grant recipient. And it's important to note that this excludes any prior mini grants. So we're looking for first-time standard grant applicants. And the final criteria, which we'll dive a little bit more into, is the environmental justice criteria. Under this section, we are looking for projects that serve and impact a disadvantaged community. So yeah, what you see on the screen now are 3 different criteria. Each is worth 5 points for a total of 15 points. And the bonus points are all or nothing. So if you do meet the requirement for that particular criteria, then you will be awarded the full points. If not, then you will not be receiving any of the bonus points. Next slide, please. So diving deeper into the environmental justice component, in which we're looking for proposals that have an impact within disadvantaged communities. And disadvantaged communities include any of the following. The first one is low-income households. These are household incomes below 80% of the area median income in the county. The second one is the low-income census tracts. The census tracts are where they aggregate household incomes, and they must be less than 80% of the area median income for that county. And you can visit the link that we provided on the slide, which will give you more information on the Santa Clara County low-income census tracts. And the final one is an area defined by the California Environmental Protection Agency. Again, if you follow the link, you'll be able to access more information and identify if the proposed community that your project will be either working or impacting. You can find more information on that link. And again, if your proposal meets one of these criteria under the environmental justice, then you would be receiving the bonus points for that category. Are there any questions in regards to the awarding process or the bonus criteria?
Looks like we're okay for now. Nothing I see in the chat box or Q&A.
Great, and I do want to open it up to the rest of the team in case I might have missed anything or if there's anything else to add.
There are some nice links if you're looking for disadvantaged communities in the frequently asked questions document, that's FAQs, and that's posted on our website.
Great, thank you, Amy. And I'll hand it off to you.
Thank you. All right, so now we'll get into the proposal requirements. So what are you going to need to turn in? Just a sec. There we go. Okay. So the following is required in your application. An online application submitted through Flux. So it has to be submitted through Flux. We don't accept email or hand delivery, anything like that. It has to be through Flux. And there are some questions in there that you'll see. So you want to make sure that you answer those questions in the fill-in boxes as thoroughly as you can, because those are included in the scoring. You'll need to include a project scope, schedule, and budget. So you'll see in the Flux system, there are templates for this. There are also templates and resources on the grants page as well. And so the project scope is a big piece of it, and it really defines your project and will be used to create your agreement. So be sure to take some time and fill that in. We'll need a resolution from a governing body. If you aren't sure whether you have a governing body or not, so that would be like a board, some kind of executive governing body, be sure to reach out to us. This may or may not be required for you, so please touch base with us, and you can email us or give us a call. The email is grants@valleywater.org. But we do have a template online on our website, and it's also in the grant guidelines, so be sure to check that out. You can copy that text. Don't forget to include your 501c3 determination letter. Or if you have a fiscal sponsor, as the question earlier, you'll need to include their determination letter and indicate that in your application. So again, feel free to reach out to us if you have any questions about that. We'll need a W-9, the Form 990, so that's for nonprofits. Audited financial statements, if you have them. Some of the smaller nonprofits don't always have audited financials. So if you are in that position, feel free again to reach out to us to see what would be required in your case. Your organizational budget, as well as a resume of key staff. So the staff that will be working on the project. Next slide. Okay, as I mentioned, the project scope will be a really important piece because it'll be part of your contract. It'll be what you're going to be doing to achieve your goals. So a good project scope would include a project summary. So what's the basic information of your project? What are the goals? And what are you trying to achieve? The location. So you'll want to include whether it's a singular location or multiple locations. Some grantees also include maps, and if that's applicable to your project, feel free to include that. You want to include the demographics and communities served. So are you working just in one area, one city? Is it countywide? Are you working with specific age groups? Are you working with students? Certain demographics, we'll want to include that, especially if you're looking for those environmental justice points, you'll want to include that information as well. Any project partners? So if you are partnering up with other organizations or you're getting grant funding from another organization, or again, if you have a fiscal sponsor, you'll want to indicate what that relationship is in your scope. And your project tasks. So what are you going to be doing? Each task to reach your goal should include the approach, the subtask, metrics, and deliverables. So if you are in a cleanup project, for example, you're doing that, then one of the tasks could be planning, another task could be the actual event, so trash pickup, and then another task could be metrics, so measuring surveys and stuff. It's really up to you. It's up to your project. Every project's different. We do have a template and sort of a guide outline on the website, so be sure to check that out. Your plans for project operations, maintenance, and monitoring. So how will this project live on beyond this grant? So let's say you are installing a bench. Who's going to maintain that bench? Who's going to make sure that it's not vandalized or that, it's still standing? If you're doing like installing trash receptacles, who's going to be emptying the trash? If you're doing plant vegetation, who's going to be out there monitoring the plant? So beyond the life of the grant. So in your grant, you may say, okay, we'll monitor and maintain it for 3 years. That's fine. If that's the case, who's going to take it on after that? And then your project team. So who's going to be working on the project? If you don't have specific staff already lined up, then a general who's going to oversee it, or general classifications of staff. Another thing I'd like to just note, there are a lot of variables these days, a lot of unknowns, especially with COVID. And for that, you could put alternatives. So for your task. So if you're going to have a public event, let's go with, you have a public education project, and you're really hoping and planning to go out to classrooms and provide education. But if you aren't sure, what's happening with COVID, you can also include an alternative that meets the same goals and deliverables. So that would be, hey, if COVID's still an issue, we won't do it in person, we'll do it virtual, we'll shift to virtual, but it'll be the same amount of attendees and they'll get the same information. So that's one example. So you do have that flexibility. And if you end up getting partial funding from your request, we will work with you to edit your project scope. But what you submit will kind of be what we're using as a baseline, and we'll be looking to maintain the spirit of the intention of your project scope, so your goals and tasks and all that stuff. Okay, next slide, please. All right, so this is so important. We're just going to keep drilling it home. You want to be sure that you read the grant guidelines, because for each project type, it's going to be scored differently. So you want to, when you're putting your scope and your budget together, go line by line and make sure that you've addressed every point. You know, even if you're kind of still working on it, but you've done some research, just provide as much information as you are able to, so that you don't leave those points on the table. Okay. Any question about the scope? No? All right. We'll have Q&A at the end too. Okay, project schedule. So you'll want to, again, read the requirements in the guidelines. Currently, for this grant cycle, we'll be offering 5-year term agreements. So that means that you have to finish your project within 5 years. If it ends up being shorter, that's totally fine. But we do need some kind of schedule to get an idea of like when you plan to start and how long you're thinking it's going to take. So importantly, you want to make sure that everything matches and aligns. So the tasks that are in your scope should also be the same tasks that are in your schedule. So keep that in mind, and also the same as in the budget. You want to be realistic. You want to, you know, make sure you include time for planning and permitting if you end up needing them, and CEQA reviews, and anything else that you'll need to kind of get together. And you may, at the end, need to shift your schedule based on the execution of the agreement. So again, if we end up awarding, let's say June 1st, it's not likely that you can start your project June 2nd. So just keep that in mind and try to be realistic in that. But we will work with you, and we'll try to get those agreements done as soon as possible. But I would assume that the agreements would be executed around September, December timeframe. And you can use any format. We do have a template online that you can use, but don't feel like you have to stick to that. Another thing that I've seen grantees do is like a start date and then build months off of that start date. So the planning, they're estimating from start date, it's going to be 3 months. And then the next phase of implementation from the planning, once planning is done, will be 6 months. And so you can build it like that as well if you don't want to be specific with dates. Next slide. Okay, project budget. So again, you want everything to match and to coincide with each other. So you want to make sure that the task in your, the task in your scope match the task in your budget as well, and your schedule, because that's how your budget's going to be laid out. And that's how you'll be invoicing per task. So keep that in mind. You'll want to have a realistic estimate. So do your research. In all of the grant criteria types, the budget is actually a factor in the scoring. And if you're like way over on personnel cost or supplies, and we do have subject matter experts analyzing and scoring. And if they see that this is way off, you might get dinged. So be realistic. And you also don't want to underestimate as well. So just keep in mind that once you're awarded, we won't increase the award amount. So if you miscalculate in your budget and something ends up costing way more than you anticipated, unfortunately, Valley Water wouldn't be able to increase the amount that we give you. So you'd have to kind of figure out how to make up that difference. So, get your estimates, talk to your partners and see how much you think things are really going to cost. You'll want to include all of your contributions. So any other grants that you get, any partners, any donations, and then any volunteers. Valley Water will only pay for 75%, up to 75% of the project cost. So we do need to see a match of 25%. So 25% of the project cost or more should be funded either by you or other project contributions, or what we call in kind. So in kind would be like volunteer work. So if you have volunteers coming out to do trash pickup or to volunteer, at your event, you can include that as part of your match. And the rate is in their frequently asked questions. So check that out. But I think currently the value of a volunteer in California is around $32. But again, check that. You'll want to make sure that you check that out. So again, look at the frequently asked questions. Okay, so I am going to show you a sample budget. So I'll go ahead and share screen. Okay, so hopefully you all can see this. This is a sample budget for a project, a cleanup project. And so you'll see here, there is a template. So if you go in Flex, you'll see the template there. And just be careful when you're in there because there are some formulas that are plugged in. And so you don't want to clear those out. But if you find yourself struggling with anything, feel free to reach out. So we'll want to know personnel services, other costs such as supplies, and any other contributions. Then you'll want to plug in the employee rate, hourly rate. How much do they make an hour? How many hours they're going to be working on the project? That'll multiply. And then you can add an additional 20% for the benefit amount, but we can't go over that. 20% per hourly rate. And so then you'll get the total cost for this supervisor, the line item. So that's the total cost of the project here. And then they also have an admin, $45. They're going to work about $250. And then you can add the benefit amount. So you calculate all these things and you come up with an employee personnel cost of $48,000 for the entire project. Then you're going to want to break that down. How are you paying for the $48,000 in personnel cost? So this person, they decided to break it up. It's by 3, but it all really depends on your situation. So they're going to pay for a third of it. And then they have a grant, another grant for who's going to pay for a third of the cost. And then that means from Valley Water, they're going to request $16,000 for personnel services. And then we're going to ask you to break down that cost. So of the personnel costs that you're asking for Valley Water, you want to break that down by task. So they're going to spend about $3,000 on planning, $3,000 on implementation, $3,000 on cleanups, and then some of their report out. So again, make sure that your tasks match your scope. We do allow overhead, but it's only on personnel costs. So it'll take this amount and multiply it by 10%. So be careful with that formula to give you an allowed overhead of $4,842 to put towards the cost. And then again, you'll want to divide that as Valley Water. Are you asking Valley Water to pay for that? Or are you going to pay for that? And then how are you going to divide that up? And then any other costs. So this would be supplies or contractors or consultants if you're paying like a flat rate or a fee or an hourly rate. So for example, here in this cleanup project, they have garbage pickers. So the things that you pick garbage up with, gloves and garbage bags. So they've broken it down by unit costs. They've done their research. They went on Amazon and then they went on 3 different other providers and they said, okay, it looks like the cost of garbage pickers is around $10.99. We think we're going to need 50 of them for a total amount of $549. So you go ahead and plug that in. And then again, you'll want to break it down by, is Valley Water going to pay 100% or, are you going to break it up? So for this one, because, you don't need the garbage pickers for planning and you'll need it for the actual cleanup, they went ahead and they put it in task 3, which is cleanup. So you put that there. And then the gloves, again, 1450 times 100. So the total for the gloves are 1,450, and then go ahead and divide that up how you'd like it. And then again, the gloves are probably going to be used during the cleanups. Makes sense. So you'll put it in task 3. Other contributions. So this could be like volunteer time or donations. So these would be the in-kind things. You put the cost. It has 24 here, but I think it's higher. And then how many volunteer hours are you expecting? And so that would be the match. There's a miscalculation here. But anyways, you would put whatever that is here, but be sure that you don't put it in the district funding, because we can't reimburse for volunteer time because you're not paying for volunteer time. So just keep that in mind. So you'll calculate and break all this out to get the total project cost is $63,000. And then how much are you asking for the district? So that's $19,000. Be sure in your application that that green box, 19,000, matches what you're requesting in the Flux application. So just keep that in mind. And then you'll break it down by task. So these should all add up, and then these should all add up to 19,000. So that was a really quick explanation of the budget. Again, there's a template. This example is on the website. And if you're really struggling, feel free to reach out to us. You can email us, or you can even schedule an appointment. Any questions about the budget before I move on? No. Okay, great. So I will go ahead and stop sharing. Okay, so we have some other requirements that are important to note. And again, every project's going to be different. So don't let these requirements scare you off, because we are here to help. And if you're new to CEQA and permitting, don't let it intimidate you. But we want to be upfront, and we want to let you know that each project will need to be, will need a CEQA review and a permit review before we execute the agreement. We'll also need approved certificate of insurance and the completed scope, schedule, and budget before we can move forward. And I will go ahead and pass it on to Peggy to dig a little deeper into those requirements.
All right, thanks, Amy. So for more details on CEQA and environmental compliance. So as a public agency, Valley Water, we must comply with the California Environmental Quality Act, also known as CEQA. And CEQA requires us as an agency to analyze a project's potential environmental impacts. So any grant proposals you are will be subject to a CEQA evaluation or CEQA review. The CEQA review is complete when the lead agency has filed a notice of determination or upon documentation that the project qualifies for an exemption. So for in terms of your grant proposal, even if you think that your project might not need a CEQA review, it's up to a environmental planner to make that determination. So we still encourage you to submit all of the environmental information related to CEQA that you can with your proposal. And our environmental planner will make that evaluation during your application review. Next slide, please. So again, as a grantee, you should provide completed CEQA documents with the application, if applicable and available. If you don't have that, any CEQA documentation yet, or it's still in the process, you can provide the following details, and it will be used in your CEQA evaluation, and that includes the project locations and access routes, any species and habitats that could be affected by the activities that's being done in your project proposal, activities that are include ground disturbance, the work schedule, and potential environmental concerns that may exist. Next slide, please. So a completed SEQR review isn't required prior to submission of your application or during the time of award. But for, proposals that have, the most details or are further along in the process of the SEQR review may score higher. And this is based on the evaluation criteria that's in the grant guidelines. And as Amy mentioned, every project is unique. So, if every detail that you can include that could help our subject matter experts review your project in this, CEQA aspect, just be sure to include it. You won't lose any points, so just include all the documentations that you can in your grant proposal. For the next requirement, permit compliance, I'll pass it over to Albert.
All right, thank you, Peggy. So yes, we do have some permit compliance issues to talk about. Valley Water requires that grantees have the proper permits before starting their projects, whether it's on private land, publicly land, or Valley Water owned property. Applicants who can show progress in obtaining these permits will be given more points based on the evaluation criteria and the grant guideline. Definitely reach out to Valley Water staff if you have more questions about permitting. In regards to Valley Water permits, only CPRU that acronym you heard earlier, they're the permitting unit within our agency. They can do for Valley Water the permit review on our end, not grant staff. And then each respective city or agency themselves have their own permitting unit or entity. So please keep that in mind. Provide as much detail as you can with your project. So if it's like a creek cleanup, please be precise about which section of the creek you're looking to do the cleanup on. That will have an impact about who has jurisdiction over the segment of the creek. And if you already have those permits or applications in, please include those as well as part of your application. All right, moving on here to the next slide. Oh, yeah, pretty much where I said earlier. So just provide them if you already have them, or at least a sample of your application as part of your application to the grants cycle. All right, moving on to the insurance term, I'm passing over to Robert.
Thank you, Albert. So lastly, we do have insurance as part of one of the requirements. And so the grantee shall adhere to the insurance requirements for the entire agreement term. You can see the attachment 4 which has a checklist of all the required insurance documents in the grant guidelines. And you could actually go ahead and look through that and consult with your broker to start getting quotes for your budget and an idea of how long it will take to get all of these endorsements. Because it is important to note that we can't start on the project unless all the required insurance have been sent over to Valley Water. A project's insurance requirements may be adjusted as needed on a case-by-case basis, and all insurance endorsements require approval before executing the agreement. So there may be some certain cases that you might need to reach out to us, and you can always feel free to email us and we'll get back to you on working on you with figuring out what insurance requirements you need. Next slide, please. All right, and then last again, our grant applications are currently open and they are due by March 4th, 2022. All applications will be submitted through our grants management system called Flex. So you could go ahead and register your organization and create a user profile. Instructions on how to do so is included in attachment 1 in the standard grants guidelines. So I highly recommend looking through that if you have any trouble. And if you have any more difficulties or need more questions or clarifications on how to navigate this website, you can always feel free to reach out to us at grants@valleywater.org and we'll be more than happy to assist you. Next slide, please. And I'll go ahead and pass it on to Renee for some important reminders.
Thanks, Robert. Before I go through the reminders, are there any questions from our participants?
Yes, we have one question that came in from Roger. So this is related to budgeting. Regarding budgeting, is the 10% overhead allowed just for personnel costs? It looks like the 10% was allowed for all personal costs, not just those Valley Water will be paying for. Am I understanding this correctly? I think it's Amy. You might want to read that one more time.
Yeah, so the overhead is across the board for personnel. So you can count it as your match, if you're not going to be requesting it from Valley Water. If you're not requesting it at all, that's fine. But you are allowed up to 10% for personnel cost overhead. And you can divvy up however you'd like.
I just want to piggyback on that, Amy, and clarify that there's no markup allowed on direct costs. So if you do end up getting awarded and have an agreement in place, and then it comes time to invoice, we will just be paying out directly what's shown on receipts. So there is no markup for direct costs like that, only what's allowable for the personnel labor charges.
And Roger, let us know, raise your hand, or if you want to ask a follow-up question if we weren't able to answer that question as well. All right, back to you, Renee.
All right, thank you. So as we get towards the end of this presentation, I do want to just go over a couple of important reminders. And the emphasis of this slide is to really rely on our standard grant guidelines. Any questions that you might have, chances are that you'll be able to find that answer in our guidelines. And of course, we're always here to help. So with that in mind, please make sure to use that document when you're creating your proposal, paying special attention to the criteria. There you'll also understand the required documents that you'll be needing to submit as part of your proposal. As Robert mentioned, please use our Flex system when submitting the application. In case you do have any questions, there's an FAQ document that we have on our website under resources. It might be that you'll find more information there. And please make sure to give yourself enough time to submit the application. As a reminder, it's due on March 4th. And it's always better to have it in case there's any issues or difficulties. With that, I'll move on to the next slide, please. All right, well, our third and last tip of the day, again, please make sure to thoroughly read and follow the grant guidelines and our FAQ to ensure that you are submitting the best proposal and the strongest proposal for your project. And with that, I'll move on to the last slide, which I'll hand over to Peggy.
So I'll be touching on the other grant opportunities that we have available through our Safe Clean Water Grants program. Right now, available on a year-round basis, we have the mini grant funding, and that's up to $5,000 per project. And this is for projects that need seed funding that benefits the Safe Clean Water priorities, including safe clean drinking water, water conservation, habitat restoration, volunteer cleanup, public art even. Any of those efforts, you can apply for a mini grant to support that project, or it can even be used as secondary funding for larger projects that support the safe clean water priorities. The application is through Flux, and so you can submit an application today. You can start today. You can, if you have any ideas for a mini grant project, we have a calendar link at our website. You can schedule a meeting with staff and we can go over your idea, let you know if that's a good proposal for you to submit an application. These do differ from the standard grants in that you receive the 50% funding that you're awarded up front. It's not reimbursement based, so you won't need to submit any receipts. And then upon completion of your project, you receive the remaining 50%. So I'm happy to help with, that process. If anyone has any questions, feel free to visit our website, set up a meeting with us, or email us at grants@valleywater.org. And then we also, back to the other slide. We also have our bottle filling station grants, which is coming very soon. And you'll be hearing more about that opportunity if you sign up for our newsletters. You can sign up at our website as well. But that will provide $5,000 for refill water stations, at public places that have public access. So that could be, your local school or your local garden or anything like that. We'll have grants available for that very soon. Next slide. All right, and I'll pass it back to Amy to close out the workshop.
Great. Thank you, Peggy. Thank you for spending your afternoon with us. We hope that you take a few minutes this afternoon to fill out our survey. That'll help us improve our workshops in the future for other possible applicants. Feel free to contact us. You can contact us, like Peggy said, by phone, by email, or on our website. We have that link to schedule appointments with us. So we'd be happy to talk to you about your specific situation. Or if you're not sure, if you're organization is required to submit some type of document. Again, the resources are on our website, valleywater.org/grants. There you'll find a list of prior grants. You'll see we've awarded all kinds of different projects. So if you're interested in that, check it out. We also have our frequently asked questions and then some of our templates. And we're updating the frequently asked questions pretty regularly. Again, we're happy to meet with you. Unfortunately, we can't do a pre-review of your application or tell you definitively whether you would be awarded or not, but we're definitely happy to provide guidance on the criteria and whether or not some of your ideas would be eligible. So we'll be happy to do that. I believe Robert has a quick announcement and then we'll be around. We'll stick around for questions.
Yeah, thank you, Amy. So yeah, one quick announcement. Valley Water is offering a summer internship program for this year. I'll go ahead and drop the link in the chat. So this internship program is open to recent college grads or current college students who are interested in learning more about the industry and gaining relevant work experience. And it's a really great opportunity and experience. So the internship applications period is open until the 31st, and I believe there is an upcoming informational session on the 27th of this month. And so the link is provided in the chat for more information on that. So if you know anyone who is interested, please feel free to share that around. And I'll pass it back to Amy.
Great, thanks, Robert. That is a really cool program if you know any college students who would be interested. So we're here to answer questions. We do have our subject matter experts on the line as well. If you have any questions about insurance or CEQA or permitting, they're here as well. And I'll just open it up to any questions. And we'll hang out.
But also feel free to leave if you need to leave.
This will also be posted on our website later on, probably tomorrow. I'll send out a follow-up email with the links to everything. I won't have the video at that time, but it will be posted on our website probably tomorrow or the next day, definitely by the end of the week. And then we have videos from the prior workshops that we've held. Thank you. Any other tips anybody wants to throw out there?
I think it's a lot of information to digest, and hopefully everyone knows how to contact us. If you think of anything else, or when you're reviewing your the standard grant guidelines and thinking of a good project to submit. But if we don't have any other questions, then maybe we can wrap up, and we'll definitely send everything out via email, as Amy mentioned, or it will be posted on our website. So thanks again for joining us. Thanks, everyone.